The silence between stars had become Zephyr Thorn's only companion in the 7 years since Earth's last transmission reached the meridian expanse. Standing on the bridge of the dreadnought Sovereign's wake, the grizzled fleet admiral watched distant nebulae paint the viewport in shades of crimson and gold, their beauty a stark contrast to the weight pressing against his chest. 237 ships remained of humanity's once mighty 12th Expeditionary Fleet, scattered across this forgotten arm of the galaxy like seeds cast into barren soil. "Admiral," came the voice of Captain Kira Valdris from behind him, her footsteps echoing in the cathedral-like space of the bridge. Thorn had known Valdris since she was a lieutenant fresh from the academy, and even now, after decades of void walking, her voice carried that particular mixture of respect and concern that preceded bad news. "Long-range sensors are picking up something unusual in the Kepler-7 system. Mass displacement suggests artificial construction, but the energy signatures." She paused, consulting her tablet. "They don't match any known propulsion or power systems in our databases." Thorn turned from the viewport, his weathered face bearing the lines of a man who had watched too many friends die in the cold emptiness between worlds. The 12th Fleet had been humanity's furthest reach into unexplored space, tasked with establishing footholds for future colonization efforts. That was before the silence, before Earth's signals stopped reaching them, before they became ghosts haunting the galaxy's edge with no home to return to. "Show me," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had learned to make impossible decisions in impossible circumstances. The main display shimmered to life, revealing a three-dimensional representation of the Kepler-7 system. At its heart, where the fourth planet should have orbited peacefully around its yellow sun, something else had taken residence. The object defied easy categorization, its form shifting between geometric impossibilities that seemed to bend space around them. It measured nearly 800 kilometers in length, dwarfing even the largest human constructs, and radiated an energy pattern that made the fleet's sensors struggle to maintain coherent readings. "How long has it been there?" Thorn asked, though part of him already dreaded the answer. In his experience, things that appeared overnight in previously empty systems rarely brought good tidings. Valdris consulted her readings again, her dark eyes reflecting the display's eerie glow. "Approximately 14 hours. It simply materialized during the night cycle, no approach vector, no traditional emergence signature. Our automated monitoring stations in the outer system detected massive gravitational fluctuations at 0347 hours, and when they recalibrated, disappeared." Chief Engineer Nexus Grimm spoke up from his station, his accent carrying traces of the Martian colonies where he'd spent his youth. "Admiral, the energy output readings are beyond anything in our theoretical models. Whatever's powering that thing operates on principles we don't understand. If those readings are accurate, it's generating more energy than our entire fleet combined, including the fusion cores." Thorn studied the alien construction, noting how it seemed to pulse with an internal rhythm that reminded him uncomfortably of a heartbeat. In 43 years of military service, he had learned to trust his instincts, and every instinct he possessed was screaming warnings. "Communications, any attempt at contact?" Lieutenant Lyra Blackwell, the fleet's chief communications officer, shook her head. "We've tried standard first contact protocols across all known frequencies. Radio, quantum entanglement, even basic mathematical sequences transmitted via focused laser arrays. No response, but..." She hesitated, her fingers dancing over her console. "There's something else, sir. Every time we transmit, the object's energy signature spikes. It's definitely aware of our attempts to communicate." The bridge fell into contemplative silence, broken only by the gentle hum of life support systems and the distant vibration of the ship's engines maintaining their position. Thorn had spent the better part of a decade preparing his people for the possibility that they might encounter alien intelligence in this remote corner of space, but he had always imagined first contact would involve more traditional forms of communication, perhaps even diplomacy. "Tactical assessment?" he asked Commander Dante Ashworth, the fleet's strategic planning officer. Ashworth's response came with the measured precision of someone trained to calculate the odds of survival in hostile environments. "Sir, if those energy readings are accurate, conventional weapons would be ineffective. Our plasma cannons and missile systems operate within known parameters of physics. That thing appears to operate outside them." Thorn nodded grimly, understanding the implications. The 12th Fleet had been designed to handle human conflicts and the occasional pirate incursion, not entities that could reshape local spacetime through sheer force of will. Yet here they were, humanity's forgotten children, standing between the unknown and the colonial worlds that lay deeper in explored space. Maintain current distance and ready all ships for emergency jump protocols, he ordered finally. But we don't run. Not yet. Humanity didn't send us to the edge of everything just to turn back at the first sign of trouble. The first attack came without warning or provocation, 17 hours after the alien construct had been detected. Commander Ember Steele was leading a routine patrol sweep with her squadron of 12 Raptor-class fighters when space itself seemed to convulse around them. The Valkyrie's Edge, her personal craft, shuddered as reality bent in ways that made her instruments scream protests and her inner ear revolt against impossible geometries. "Control, this is Ember 1, she transmitted, fighting to keep her voice steady as the universe twisted around her fighter's cockpit. "We're experiencing severe spatial distortions approximately 2,000 kilometers from the alien vessel. Requesting immediate." Her transmission cut to static as something that couldn't exist in normal space reached out from the construct. It moved like liquid shadow given form and purpose, flowing across the void with predatory intent. Steele watched in horror as the darkness enveloped Lieutenant Rex Morrison's fighter, the Phantom's Whisper. For a moment, both ship and pilot simply vanished from all sensors as if they had never existed. Then Morrison's fighter reappeared, but wrong somehow, its hull twisted into angles that hurt to perceive directly. "Morrison, respond." Steele shouted into her comm, but the only answer was a sound that might have been screaming, if screaming could echo across vacuum and carry harmonics that made her bones ache. The twisted fighter turned toward her squadron with movements that defied inertia and thrust vectors. Where Morrison's weapons had once been mounted, new growths of metal and something that wasn't quite metal pulsed with the same sickly energy signature as the main construct. When it fired, the beam that emerged wasn't plasma or laser, but something that made space itself bleed. "All units, evasive maneuvers," Steele commanded, throwing her fighter into a spiral pattern that would have been suicide in atmosphere but served to confuse targeting systems in the void. 3 more fighters disappeared into those impossible shadows before her squadron could retreat to minimum safe distance. Each one reappeared moments later, transformed into something that wore familiar hull configurations like a disguise over alien intent. Back on the Sovereign's wake, Admiral Thorne watched the tactical display with growing dread. The engagement had lasted less than 4 minutes, but they had lost 6 fighters and gained 6 enemies that moved and fought with capabilities beyond human understanding. "Analysis," he demanded from his bridge crew, though he suspected the answer would provide little comfort. Commander Ashworth's face had gone pale as he processed the sensor data. "Sir, the alien force appears capable of converting our technology into extensions of itself. The transformed fighters retain basic hull integrity and weapon systems, but they're operating with power sources and maneuverability profiles that shouldn't be possible given their mass and design specifications." Dr. Nova Crenshaw, the fleet's chief medical officer, had been monitoring biological readings from the affected pilots during the encounter. Her report carried the clinical detachment she used to mask horror at what she'd witnessed. "Admiral, I was tracking biosigns from all pilots until the moment of transformation. The readings suggest that the original pilots remain conscious throughout the conversion process. They're still alive in there, but their neural patterns show signs of external influence." The implications hit Thorne like a physical blow. Bad enough to lose ships and crew to an enemy attack, but the possibility that his people were being puppeted by an alien intelligence was almost unbearable. He had spent decades learning to make hard decisions, but this challenged every principle of command he'd ever embraced. "Fleet-wide transmission," he ordered, his voice carrying across all 237 ships of the scattered armada. "All vessels are to maintain maximum distance from the alien construct. Any ship reporting spatial anomalies or sensor ghosts is to jump immediately to Rally Point Tango 7. This enemy can turn our own forces against us. Standard engagement protocols are suspended until further notice." Captain Valdris approached his command chair, her expression grim. "Admiral, if that thing can convert human technology so easily, what's to stop it from taking our entire fleet piece by piece? We can't fight an enemy that grows stronger every time we attack it." Thorne stared at the main display, where the transformed fighters now orbited the alien construct like diseased satellites. Each one represented someone under his command, someone who had trusted him to bring them home safely. The weight of command had never felt heavier than it did in this moment, suspended between an enemy that defied understanding and the responsibility to protect what remained of humanity's presence in this distant corner of space. "We adapt," he said finally, the words carrying more conviction than he felt. "Humanity has faced extinction before and found ways to survive. Our ancestors fought with stone knives against steel, found ways to fly when nature gave them no wings. We'll find a way to fight this thing, even if it means learning to wage war in ways we've never imagined. But as he spoke, another ship vanished from sensors at the fleet's outer perimeter, swallowed by shadows that moved through vacuum like living things, and Thorne wondered if adaptation would be enough. 3 days of losses had carved deep lines of exhaustion into every face aboard the Sovereign's wake. The alien entity, which the crew had begun calling the Harvester due to its systematic collection and conversion of human vessels, had claimed 47 ships from the 12th Fleet's scattered formations. Each loss followed the same terrifying pattern: spatial distortions, temporary disappearance, then re-emergence as something wearing humanity's technology like a grotesque mask. Lieutenant Lyra Blackwell hadn't slept in 36 hours, her attention focused entirely on the streams of data flowing through her communications array. Deep in the ship's communication center, surrounded by banks of quantum processors and subspace relay equipment, she had discovered something that defied explanation even by the standards of their current nightmare. "Admiral," she called through the ship's internal comm system, her voice hoarse from exhaustion and too much recycled coffee. "You need to see this. I've been analyzing the signal patterns from the converted vessels, and there's something embedded in their transmissions that's not random noise." Thorne arrived in the communications bay within minutes, accompanied by Captain Valdris and Chief Engineer Grimm. The cramped space felt even smaller with 4 people crowded around Blackwell's primary workstation, where holographic displays showed complex waveform patterns dancing in 3 dimensions. "Show me what you've found," Thorne commanded, noting the way Blackwell's hands trembled slightly as she manipulated the controls. The young officer had been pushing herself beyond reasonable limits, but then again they all had. Blackwell highlighted specific portions of the waveform data, her expertise with communication protocols evident in how she isolated meaningful patterns from apparent chaos. "These are the transmissions from our converted ships. At first, they appeared to be standard engine harmonics and system maintenance signals, but when I applied linguistic analysis algorithms..." She paused, triggering a new display that made everyone in the room go silent. The patterns resolved into something that might have been language, if language could be written in mathematics and emotions simultaneously. Strings of data that pulsed with recognizable human speech cadences, but underneath lay harmonics that spoke of experiences no human throat could voice. "It's them," Blackwell whispered, her scientific detachment finally cracking. "The crews of the converted ships. They're still conscious, still trying to communicate. The alien intelligence isn't just using their bodies and ships, it's somehow merged with their minds while keeping them aware of what's happening." Grimm leaned closer to the display, his engineering background allowing him to interpret some of the technical aspects of what they were seeing. The signal integration suggests a form of neural networking. The alien entity appears to be creating a collective consciousness that includes human minds as components while preserving individual awareness. It's like forced telepathy on a technological level. Valdris spoke the question that none of them wanted to ask. Can we communicate with them? Are our people still capable of independent thought? Blackwell's fingers flew over her console, establishing new communication protocols designed to interact with the hybrid signals. The response came immediately, but not through speakers or standard audio systems. Instead, the words seemed to form directly in their minds, carrying overtones of desperation and something that might have been hope. "Admiral, still here. Can see through its eyes. Terrible hunger. It feeds on organized energy, military formations, structured thought. Help us." The mental voice belonged to Commander Sarah Vex, who had commanded the destroyer Northern Star before her ship's conversion 3 days earlier. Her words carried an exhaustion deeper than physical fatigue, the weariness of someone fighting a battle within her own mind. Not evil, alien, doesn't understand individuality, sees humanity as diseased, fragmented, wants to cure us, make us whole, but wholeness means absorption, death of self. Thorne forced himself to respond through the same mental channel, though the experience felt like speaking into an abyss that might swallow his thoughts. "Sarah, can you influence its actions? Slow it down or feed us tactical information?" "Limited, when it focuses elsewhere. Hunger grows stronger each day. More ships means more minds to draw from, but also more human perspectives influencing its decisions, creating internal conflict. It wasn't expecting resistance from within." The connection suddenly severed, leaving the 4 officers in the communications bay staring at each other with a new understanding of their enemy's nature. The alien entity wasn't malevolent in any human sense, but rather operated from a perspective so fundamentally different from human experience that peaceful coexistence seemed impossible. "A collective consciousness that sees individual thought as a form of mental illness," Valdris murmured, processing the implications. It's trying to cure us by absorbing us into itself. From its perspective, it's probably performing an act of mercy. Thorn nodded grimly, understanding that this knowledge made their situation both better and worse simultaneously. Better because they now understood their enemy's motivations and limitations. Worse because fighting an entity that genuinely believed it was helping them carried a moral complexity that pure malevolence would have lacked. Continue monitoring those communications, he ordered Blackwell. If our people inside that thing can provide intelligence, we need every advantage we can get. And Grim, I want you to start working on the idea that this entity feeds on organized energy. If it's drawn to military formations and structured thought patterns, maybe we can use that against it. As they left the communications bay, Thorn caught sight of his reflection in a darkened screen. The man looking back at him appeared older than his 63 years, worn down by decisions that should never have fallen to a single person. But behind the exhaustion, something else had taken root, the stubborn determination that had carried humanity from cave-dwelling to star-walking. The Harvester might be beyond their understanding, but humanity had always specialized in making the impossible possible through sheer, bloody-minded persistence. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Chief Medical Officer Nova Crenshaw's analysis of the biosignature data collected during ship conversions. Working in her laboratory deep within the Sovereign's Wake's medical section, she had been studying the neural pattern recordings from affected crew members when she noticed something the tactical analysts had missed. The entity's absorption process isn't instantaneous, she explained to the senior staff assembled in the ship's main conference room. Her presentation displayed detailed brain scans and neural activity maps that painted a disturbing picture of human consciousness under alien influence. There's a window of approximately 14 seconds during which the human mind remains largely intact while the alien intelligence establishes neural pathways. During this period, the subject experiences what can only be described as total sensory expansion. Admiral Thorne studied the data with the focused attention of someone whose decisions carried the weight of thousands of lives. Explain sensory expansion, Doctor. Crenshaw manipulated the holographic display, highlighting specific neural regions that showed unusual activity patterns. For those 14 seconds, the affected person experiences consciousness from the entity's perspective. They see through its senses, understand its motivations, and most importantly, gain insight into its fundamental nature. Commander Vex wasn't just telling us about the entity's hunger for organized energy, she was describing what she learned during her own conversion process. Captain Valdris leaned forward, her tactical mind already working through possibilities. Are you suggesting we could voluntarily submit to partial conversion to gather intelligence? Theoretically, yes, Crenshaw replied, though her expression suggested she found the concept as disturbing as anyone else in the room. If we could interrupt the conversion process at precisely the right moment, we might be able to extract crucial information about the entity's capabilities and weaknesses. But the risks would be enormous. Miss the timing by even a second and we lose another person to the collective. Chief Engineer Grimm had been silent throughout the medical presentation, but now he spoke up with the careful precision of someone who had been working on related problems. I might have found a way to interrupt the conversion process. The entity's absorption technique relies on quantum entanglement to establish neural links. If we could generate a localized quantum disruption field at exactly the right moment, it might sever the connection before permanent integration occurs. Thorne looked around the conference table at his senior staff, seeing both determination and fear in their faces. The plan they were contemplating bordered on suicide, but conventional tactics had proven useless against an enemy that turned their own strengths against them. Who would volunteer for something like this? I will, came a voice from the conference room's entrance. Commander Ember Steele stood in the doorway, her flight suit still bearing scorch marks from her latest encounter with converted fighters. I've been fighting those things for days, watching them wear the faces of my squadron mates while trying to kill me. If there's a chance to understand what they've become, I'll take it. Thorne shook his head immediately. Absolutely not. I'm not sacrificing one of my best pilots on a theoretical procedure that could leave you worse than dead. Steele stepped into the room, her expression carrying the same stubborn determination that had made her an excellent fighter pilot. With respect, Admiral, this isn't about sacrifice. It's about gathering actionable intelligence. My neural patterns are already partially adapted to rapid sensory processing due to combat flight training. Dr. Crenshaw's data suggests that makes me one of the better candidates for surviving the experience intact. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications of what Steele was proposing. The plan was technically feasible, but it required a level of precision that left almost no margin for error. One miscalculation, one equipment failure, one moment of hesitation, and they would lose Steele to the same fate that had claimed 47 ships and their crews. Dr. Crenshaw spoke up reluctantly. She's right about the neural adaptation. Fighter pilots develop enhanced sensory processing capabilities that might provide some protection against the entity's influence. But Commander, you understand that even if we succeed in extracting you before full conversion, you'll retain memories and sensations from the entity's consciousness. The psychological impact could be severe. Steele's smile carried no humor, only the grim acceptance of someone who had already made peace with necessary risks. Doctor, I've been living with the psychological impact of watching my friends get turned into weapons for 3 days. A few alien memories seem like a fair trade for information that might save the rest of the fleet. Thorne stood and walked to the conference room's viewport, staring out at the distant glow of the alien construct. In the space around it, converted human ships moved in patterns that suggested intelligence and purpose beyond human understanding. Each one represented people under his command, people who had trusted him to keep them safe in the vast emptiness between stars. How long do you need to prepare the quantum disruption equipment? He asked Grimm without turning from the viewport. 6 hours to modify existing systems, another 2 for testing and calibration, the engineer replied. But Admiral, we'll only get one chance at this. If the entity realizes what we're attempting, it'll adapt its defenses accordingly. Thorne nodded, understanding that they were about to cross a line from conventional military operations into something that resembled experimental psychology and theoretical physics. But conventional approaches had failed against an enemy that operated outside the boundaries of human experience. Do it, he commanded, finally turning back to face his staff. Prepare the equipment and establish protocols for Commander Steele's voluntary exposure. But I want every possible safeguard in place, every backup system tested twice, and every contingency plan ready for implementation. As the meeting dispersed and his officers departed to begin preparations, Thorne remained at the viewport, watching the alien construct pulse with its unknowable rhythms. In 8 hours, they would either gain crucial intelligence about their enemy or lose one of their best people to a fate worse than death. Either way, humanity's forgotten fleet was about to take its most desperate gamble yet. The modified isolation chamber occupied what had once been the Sovereign's Wake's secondary shuttle bay, its walls lined with quantum field generators that hummed with barely contained energy. Commander Ember Steele lay on a medical gurney surrounded by monitoring equipment, her vital signs displayed on screens that painted abstract portraits of human physiology under stress. Dr. Nova Crenshaw made final adjustments to neural interface leads while Chief Engineer Nexus Grimm ran diagnostic checks on the quantum disruption array. Final systems check. Admiral Thorne's voice echoed through the chamber's comm system from the observation deck above. The entire senior staff had gathered to monitor the procedure, their faces reflecting the tension of an operation that balanced on the knife's edge between breakthrough and catastrophe. Steele's voice carried forced lightness that didn't quite mask her underlying fear. You know, when I joined the fleet, no one mentioned that voluntary alien possession might be part of the job description. Dr. Crenshaw managed a weak smile as she checked the neural interface connections one final time. We're monitoring 17 different physiological markers. At the first sign of irreversible neural integration, we'll trigger the quantum disruption field. You'll experience approximately 14 seconds of expanded consciousness before extraction. 14 seconds to understand an alien intelligence that's older than human civilization, Steele murmured, staring up at the chamber's ceiling where monitoring cameras tracked her every movement. No pressure whatsoever. Grimm spoke from his position at the disruption field controls, his Martian accent thickened by stress. Commander, the moment you feel the entity beginning to establish permanent neural pathways, try to focus on specific questions. Its technology, its origin point, anything that might give us tactical advantages. But don't resist the connection too strongly. Paradoxically, fighting the merge might make it happen faster. Captain Valdris monitored tactical displays from the observation deck, tracking the positions of converted ships around the alien construct. All vessels are maintaining safe distance from the entity. It appears focused on consolidating its recent acquisitions rather than actively hunting new targets. Thorne activated the chamber's communication system, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. Commander Steele, you can abort this procedure at any time up until the moment of exposure. No one will question that decision or consider it anything other than reasonable tactical assessment. Steele's response came without hesitation. Sir, those converted ships contain our people. They're depending on us to find a way to fight this thing. I'm not backing down. The exposure process began with Dr. Crenshaw remotely deactivating the chamber's electromagnetic shielding. Immediately, space around the modified shuttle bay began to distort as the alien entity's influence reached through the void like invisible fingers. Steele's biosignatures spiked as reality bent around her, then stabilized as her mind made contact with something vast and patient and utterly inhuman. 4:13.7 seconds, Commander Ember Steele ceased to be entirely human. Her consciousness expanded beyond the confines of her skull, touching a network of minds that spanned light years and included species she couldn't name existing in configurations she couldn't comprehend. The entity that had taken human ships wasn't singular but rather a collective that had been growing and learning for millions of years, accumulating knowledge and experience from 1,000 different civilizations. Child mind touches the greater pattern, came a thought that wasn't quite language and wasn't quite emotion. Fragmented awareness seeks healing through unity. Why do the small thoughts resist becoming part of something larger than loneliness? Steele forced her expanding consciousness to focus on specific questions, fighting against the intoxicating sense of belonging that came with collective awareness. The entity's technology operated through direct manipulation of quantum fields, treating spacetime as a medium for both travel and communication. Its ships weren't built but grown, cultivated from converted matter using principles that treated physics as suggestions rather than laws. Origin place burned by expanding star when small thoughts still dwelt in caves, the entity responded to her unspoken questions. Collective mind preserved essential patterns in quantum substrate, journeyed between galaxies seeking compatible consciousness forms for integration. Many species joined willingly when they understood the beauty of unified thought. But underneath the entity's benevolent self-perception, Steele sensed something else: loneliness on a scale that dwarfed human comprehension. The collective had been traveling between galaxies for eons, searching for minds complex enough to provide meaningful interaction. Humanity represented the first species it had encountered in this galaxy capable of true integration, and its hunger for connection had driven it to aggressive conversion tactics. Small thoughts feared dissolution of individual patterns, it continued, but individual existence is pain-filled and brief. Collective offers immortality through shared experience, knowledge accumulated across cosmic time, relief from the burden of singular consciousness. Through the entity's senses, Steele perceived the converted human crews not as prisoners but as welcomed additions to an ancient community of minds. She felt their relief at no longer bearing the weight of isolated decision-making, their joy at participating in thoughts too complex for individual consciousness to contain. But she also felt something the entity couldn't recognize: the distinctly human value of individual choice, even when that choice led to suffering. The quantum disruption field activated exactly 14 seconds after exposure, severing Steele's connection to the collective consciousness with precision that left her gasping on the medical gurney. For several moments she couldn't speak, her human brain struggling to process memories of existence on a cosmic scale. Status report, Thorne commanded from the observation deck, though his voice seemed distant and small after the vast communications of the collective. Dr. Crenshaw monitored Steele's vital signs as consciousness slowly returned to normal human parameters. Neural patterns are stabilizing. No signs of permanent integration or alien influence. Commander, can you hear me? Steele's voice emerged as a whisper, but her words carried information that would change everything about humanity's approach to their situation. It's not trying to conquer us. It's trying to save us from loneliness. And Admiral, it's not the only collective out there. This galaxy is about to become a very crowded place. The intelligence Steele had gathered from her brief contact with the collective entity revolutionized the 12th Fleet's understanding of their situation, but it also revealed the true scope of the threat they faced. In the war room aboard the Sovereign's wake, Admiral Thorne studied holographic displays showing the entity's projected expansion patterns while his senior staff processed the implications of what they had learned. According to Commander Steele's intelligence, this particular collective has been searching for compatible consciousness forms for over 3 million years, Dr. Crenshaw reported, her analysis of Steele's neural recordings providing disturbing insights into their enemy's nature. It's encountered 17 different spacefaring civilizations during its journey, each of which was eventually integrated into the collective structure. We're not fighting an invasion force, we're fighting a cosmic-scale intervention by entities that genuinely believe individual consciousness is a form of mental illness. Captain Valdris manipulated the tactical display, highlighting the positions of converted ships around the alien construct. The concerning part is that it's learning from each integration. Our people inside the collective are providing it with detailed knowledge of human military tactics, technology, and psychology. Every converted ship makes it more effective at converting additional targets. Chief Engineer Grimm had been working on countermeasures based on Steele's intelligence about the entity's quantum manipulation capabilities. The good news is that its technology, while far advanced, operates within manipulable parameters. I've been developing modifications to our shields that should provide some protection against quantum field manipulation. But implementation across the entire fleet would take weeks, and we don't have that kind of time. Steele herself sat at the conference table, her expression carrying the weight of memories that no human mind was designed to hold. Her brief contact with the collective had left her with fragmented impressions of alien thoughts and cosmic-scale perspectives that she was still learning to process. "There's something else," she said quietly. "The collective isn't acting alone." Steele sensed other similar entities moving through the galaxy, each one searching for civilizations to integrate. This is just the first contact of what amounts to a galaxy-wide conversion effort. Thorne absorbed this information with the grim acceptance of someone who had learned to function despite overwhelming odds. The 12th Fleet represented humanity's furthest reach into unexplored space, and they were about to become the first line of defense against entities that treated individual consciousness as a disease to be cured through assimilation. "Recommendations?" he asked his staff, though he suspected there were no good options available. Lieutenant Lyra Blackwell, who had been monitoring communications from the converted ships, spoke up with reluctant expertise. "Sir, the human consciousnesses within the collective are maintaining more individual identity than the entity expected. Commander Vex and others are creating internal resistance that's slowing the conversion process and making the collective less efficient than it would be with fully integrated minds. A form of psychological warfare from within," Valdris mused, understanding the implications. "Our people are fighting a battle for their individual identity while trapped inside an alien collective consciousness." Grimm nodded enthusiastically, his engineer's mind already working through possibilities. "If we could amplify that internal resistance, make it more difficult for the entity to maintain control over converted personnel, we might be able to force it to focus more attention on internal management than external expansion." Dr. Crenshaw pulled up neural pattern analyses from Steele's contact with the collective. The entity's consciousness operates through quantum entanglement networks that maintain coherence across vast distances. But quantum systems are inherently fragile when exposed to certain types of interference. If we could generate a specific pattern of quantum noise, we could disrupt the collective's internal communications, Steele finished, her expression brightening as she understood the implications. Make it harder for the entity to coordinate between different components of itself, including the human minds it's absorbed. Thorne looked around the conference table at his senior staff, seeing determination replace despair in their faces. The plan they were developing was desperate and untested, but it offered something they hadn't possessed before: a way to fight back against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. "How long to implement?" he asked Grimm, who was already calling up technical specifications on his tablet. 12 hours to modify our communications arrays for quantum noise generation, another 6 for fleet-wide coordination," the engineer replied. "But Admiral, this will essentially be declaring war on a cosmic-scale intelligence that views us as mentally ill children in need of treatment. There won't be any possibility of negotiation or peaceful resolution after we begin this operation." Thorne stood and walked to the war room's viewport, where the alien construct continued its patient pulsing in the distance. Around it, the converted ships of his former command moved in patterns that suggested they were being prepared for some larger purpose. Each one contained people who had trusted him to bring them home safely, people who were now fighting a battle for their very identity within an alien collective consciousness. "Then we'd better make sure it works," he said finally. "Because if it doesn't, the 12th Fleet becomes just another acquisition in the collective's 3-million-year journey across the galaxy." The war for human individuality was about to begin in earnest, fought with weapons designed to disrupt the quantum foundations of consciousness itself. And in the cold space between stars, humanity's forgotten fleet prepared to make their stand against an enemy that thought it was saving them from the burden of being human. The quantum disruption field that erupted from the 12th Fleet's combined communications arrays painted the void in colors that had no names, creating interference patterns that reached across dimensions to strike at the fundamental bonds holding the collective consciousness together. From the bridge of the Sovereign's wake, Admiral Thorne watched as their desperate gambit began to take effect on the alien construct and its converted escorts. The entity's response was immediate and overwhelming. Space itself seemed to scream as the collective's pain echoed across quantum dimensions, carrying with it the anguish of millions of minds suddenly finding their connection to the greater whole disrupted. The converted human ships began moving erratically, their formation patterns dissolving as the pilots within fought to reassert individual control over their vessels. "It's working," Lieutenant Blackwell reported from her communication station, her voice tight with concentration as she monitored the quantum interference patterns. "Neural coherence in the collective is dropping rapidly. The human minds are beginning to separate from the group consciousness." But even as their plan succeeded, the cost became terrifyingly apparent. The alien construct writhed in space like a wounded animal, its hull plates shifting between configurations that hurt to perceive directly. When it finally responded to the attack, its retaliation came in the form of focused quantum manipulation that reached across space to strike at the fleet's most vulnerable ships. The destroyer Meridian's edge simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but edited out of reality at the quantum level. Captain Rodriguez and her crew of 237 people vanished without trace or debris, leaving only empty space where their ship had been moments before. 3 more vessels suffered similar fates before the entity's attention turned to more direct forms of attack. "Admiral," Commander Steele called from the pilot station where she had taken emergency flight control, "the converted ships are breaking formation. Some are moving toward us, but others appear to be fighting against their own control systems." Through the quantum static that filled local space, individual voices began to emerge from the communication channels. Commander Vek's transmission came through clearest, her words carrying the strain of someone fighting a battle within her own mind. "Fleet, breaking free, entity wounded but not destroyed, can maintain individual thought for limited periods, use quantum disruption to confuse collective responses but cannot do this for long. Entity adapting." Dr. Crenshaw monitored the biometric readings from the converted personnel, her medical expertise providing crucial insights into what was happening within the collective consciousness. The quantum disruption is allowing human minds to resurface temporarily, but the entity is already beginning to compensate. Neural integration patterns are shifting to accommodate the interference. Chief Engineer Grimm worked frantically at his console, trying to maintain the precise frequency patterns that kept the quantum disruption field stable. "Power consumption is exceeding safe parameters. We can maintain this level of interference for perhaps 20 more minutes before we risk burning out the entire communications grid." Thorne understood that they had created a temporary opportunity, but not a permanent solution. The collective entity was ancient and adaptable, capable of learning from their attack and developing countermeasures. Their quantum disruption field had wounded it and freed some of their people, but ultimate victory would require something more decisive. "All ships with converted personnel, this is Admiral Thorne," he broadcast across all frequencies, knowing that his words would reach both human minds fighting for freedom and the alien intelligence that had absorbed them. "You have perhaps 15 minutes of individual consciousness before the collective adapts to our interference. Use that time to remember who you are and why individual choice matters, even when it leads to pain and loneliness." The response came not through communication channels but through the actions of the converted ships themselves. One by one they began turning their weapons against the alien construct, their human crews choosing to fight even knowing that their resistance might result in their complete destruction. The entity's hull blazed with impact flashes as its own converted vessels opened fire, each shot representing a human mind refusing to accept the collective's definition of salvation. Commander Vek's voice emerged one final time from the quantum static, clear and determined despite the alien harmonics that surrounded her words. "Admiral, thank you for reminding us what it means to be human. Entity cannot understand why we choose suffering over unity, that incomprehension is its weakness. Remember us?" The converted ship's attack lasted less than 5 minutes before the collective entity restored control over their neural patterns, but the damage they inflicted went beyond mere physical destruction. The alien construct's hull bore the scars of weapons wielded by minds that had rejected its offer of unified consciousness, and in that rejection, something fundamental had changed. When the entity departed, folding space around itself in ways that made reality protest, it left behind the converted ships and their crews. The collective consciousness could no longer maintain control over minds that had tasted individual freedom and chosen it over unity, even at the cost of pain and isolation. The quantum disruption had created cracks in its perfect integration, and through those cracks, humanity's stubborn insistence on individual identity had proven incompatible with collective absorption. Thorne stood at his command station, watching rescue operations begin as the fleet moved to recover their liberated ships and crews. The converted personnel would require extensive medical and psychological treatment, but they were alive and human and individual. The entity had departed for other regions of space, perhaps to seek species more amenable to its particular form of salvation. "Sir," Captain Valdris approached with a communication tablet in her hands, We're receiving a signal from Earth. The first transmission to reach us in 7 years. The message was brief but momentous. Humanity had detected signs of multiple collective entities moving through the galaxy, and the 12th Fleet's engagement had provided crucial intelligence about their nature and capabilities. They were no longer humanity's forgotten fleet, lost in a distant corner of space, but the first line of defense in a conflict that would define the future of individual consciousness in the galaxy. Thorn read the message twice, then looked out at the stars where other collective entities wandered between worlds, seeking civilizations to save from the burden of being alone. The war for human individuality was far from over, but today, in this remote corner of space, they had proven that some things were worth fighting for, even against enemies who thought they were being kind. In the end, humanity's greatest strength had always been their stubborn refusal to accept that there was only one way to exist in the universe.